It's Friday, I'm Sophy Ridge, live from Westminster, and this is the Vote 2025 Politics Hub special. Well, there is an awful lot of politics to get through today. It does feel like a seismic result, of course, in those local elections. But a breaking story tonight as well is the new interview that Prince Harry has given. He spoke out after losing his court battle over his security protection here in the UK. And it's fair to say he's not held back. In an apparent reference to his father's cancer, he's told the BBC he doesn't know how long the King's got left. On the political front, he claimed his case was the victim of an establishment stitch-up, and he's called on the government to intervene. Well, we're now joined by the royal historian and author, Dr. Tessa Dunlop. Great to have you on the programme. What's your reaction to Prince Harry's interview today?
Whoa, it's really complicated in Harry's head, isn't it? There has to be, on one level, and I know people get slightly fed up of this 5 years on, a degree of sympathy with Harry, who's got this very emotional response to what is a cold, hard, legal system. And his emotional response to what is, many people say this about the British monarchy, oh, well, you wouldn't invent it today. You know, it's a bit crazy. It is a kind of nonsense world that he was born into, once a prince, always a prince. But despite the judge recognising the legitimacy of those emotional grievances, it doesn't translate into a legal argument for protection when he's in the country if he's not a working royal. And the problem we then have is Harry conflates that legal loss, £1.5 million is the cost, by the way, that people are putting on this defeat, with his family, of course, also being the institution. At the same time, he's talking about reconciliation. And again, it's a case of ne'er the twain will meet, Harry.
Yeah, you mentioned there the reconciliation that Prince Harry says he would like to have. You know, how likely do you think that is to happen, particularly bearing in mind the fact he just very publicly said it's something that he wants?
Well, he says he publicly wants it, but in the previous breath, he basically parks a lot of the blame for this legal ruling at the feet of his father, rather curiously saying, you know, it was not so much he should have got involved, but he should have stepped to one side. We're not quite clear what he thinks Charles's role is. I mean, they are His Majesty's courts. But what is Harry implying there, although he undermines that argument that the King really is the supreme legal authority, when he suggests maybe the new government might have a different view? So it's a case of very muddled thinking. Harry has many strengths, and I'm not sure that one of them is an understanding of the legal system, although, of course, he had that extraordinary victory, really, over the Murdoch press quite recently, and indeed the Mirror Group. But he's come unstuck here. It's easy to say it's an establishment stitch-up. I think it's more a case of the law, or it's almost like, you know, when it's something, you want a kind of personal response to something and the computer says no. That's what I feel like here. The computer said no to Harry. They're not recognising him as this person who's always going to be a prince, even if he's removed himself from the system, because it's not stacking up legally. But I think where he falls down a bit is that, you know, throwing his toys at the pram, once again, blowing it off against his father, and then in the second breath saying he wants the reconciliation, because that's not going to happen, Harry. As long as you park blame at your father's feet, you're not going to have the reconciliation, which suggests he's not really ready for the reconciliation.
Yeah, I always think there is something so extraordinary about the royal family, because they are wrapped up in all of this pomp and tradition and, you know, all that kind of thing. But there's just a normal family at the end of the day, and the kind of disputes that lots of families have around the country just played out in this kind of heartbreaking way in front of us all. I mean, whenever I hear, you know, Prince Harry speaking like this, I can kind of barely believe what we're getting.
It's gutting. And it's one and the same time the reason why the monarchy is so intrinsically fascinating, why we can never let go of it. Because on the one hand, they are this private family, and that intersects with this very public institution. All well and good for us, the media, Sophie, feeding off it, and not so bad if you've got quite a clear-cut role, like you're next in line to the throne. You know, Prince William, okay, has had some private difficulties. Really, that's a pretty privileged gig in many respects, becoming head of state, following in the revered steps of your late grandmother and now father. But for Harry, it's way more complicated. He's decided to sack off all the institutional bits, but is still kind of clunking around with that the furniture and the privilege, the entitlement of his childhood. You know, you can't stop being a prince, and that's the nature of hereditary monarchy. We don't get to choose who becomes king, just like they don't really get to choose to leave, which is why I think the judge did say he understood some of Harry's grievances. And there's almost a bit of me that thinks, can't we just swing him a bye, let him through on this one, just for the sort of sake of calmer waters? But sadly, the legal system doesn't work like that.
No, and the other thing that Harry said today is he's called on the Prime Minister, the government, to get involved. Just explain that.
Yeah, well, this is the interesting thing. He calls it, and this is where his argument fell apart, because on the one hand, he's parking it at King Charles, suggesting he has control of this. He could throw it back to Ravec and up the RMB. But on the other hand, he's saying, oh, well, now there's a different administration because it was this old-fashioned stitch-up, presumably, i.e. with the Conservatives, but maybe now we've got this more liberal-minded Labour administration. They might review it. But more broadly, what's interesting about the timing of this, and of course, arguably the decision, came today and he was going to speak off the back of it. But this is a very, very big week, the eve of a very big week for royalty. They are the centrepiece of our VE Day commemorations. And it's actually, it's devastating, really. It underpicks so much of that kind of full frontal family unity that they're going to be seeking to achieve next week as really an arm of state. This is the extension, if you like, of our government, the pomp, the ceremonial, the symbolic, representatives up there on the balcony. And I can't believe that Harry isn't fully aware of what he's doing. And it's a little bit naughty, really, that, I think.
Harry's also very aware of the public opinion of himself here in the UK. It does feel like it's something that he is aware of himself and finds it hard to kind of ignore. Do you think that these kind of interventions and interviews help him in the court of public opinion or not?
I'm sure they don't. There's something so tragic about this, Sophie. I've been doing a lot of work recently around commemoration, and I've worked with the parents who have lost sons and daughters in Iraq and Afghanistan, and without fail, all of them speak to how exceptional Harry was on that commemorative circuit, making them feel seen, connecting with their pain, because Harry understands pain and he's got a real gift of empathy. And the way he had of making them feel like they were sitting next to their dead son in a way, or like one of his friends, because he was so sort of easy with them. And so in this next week, when it's all about military remembrance and ceremony, he's a real loss. And the problem is, the more he indulges, because this is pretty indulgent behaviour, the further away he walks from those ideas of Harry. And they are majestic versions of Harry. There's many faces. We all have many faces. And those impressive, honourable aspects of Harry, I think, become further and further removed. And we instead get this sort of slightly brattish Californian Harry. He's sporting a very nice tan, got to be said, but I think he's a little less sympathetic.
Always good to talk to you, Tessa. Thank you so much for coming on the programme and talking us through the latest twist in the Prince Harry plot and the royal family machinations. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, we'll be getting lots of reaction here on Sky News tonight to that Harry interview. But of course, the other big story today has been the English elections. And look, I've been thinking about this because in a way, what's happened over the last 24 hours shouldn't be a surprise because it's been building for a while. The signs were there. But to me, it still feels like we're going to look back at this moment as hugely significant, when the dominance of the two parties was shattered, and crucially, when Reform finally managed to convert votes into seats. And controlling councils matters for the areas that the councils are in, of course, but it also matters because it gives the party an infrastructure and an organisation that they can build on and then build towards the next general election too. It also, of course, gives them a record in power that they can be judged on. So there are now huge questions. Is this existential for the Conservatives, trapped by a pincer movement of both Reform and the Lib Dems? How should Labour respond to losing hundreds of seats less than a year after that landslide general election? What message are voters trying to send? An awful lot to explore tonight. Let's get the story of the day now. Here is our political editor, Beth Rigby. Just a warning first that her report does contain some flash photography.
Just 6 votes in it. Nigel Farage's Reform winning the Runcorn by-election on the slightest of margins in a victory of massive significance. Reform on the march, not just here, but right across the country. Its popularity surge in the polls now translating into real power. We've just left Runcorn, where Reform have won that by-election by 6 votes. And I've just made a few phone calls and got a tip-off that the next place I should be heading to is Durham, big Labour territory. Reform think they've done very well in the council elections there, so we've got to get up there. Farage on a victory tour taking him across the Red Wall, greeting jubilant supporters in Durham, where Labour had dominated local politics for a century until now. What's your message to Kemi Badenoch and what's your message to Keir Starmer?
The message to Keir Starmer, sarcastically, is please keep doing what you're doing. And the message to Kemi Badenoch is, well, frankly, the Conservative Party's finished today. It's gone. It's dying in the shires. It has no future. It stands for nothing. It serves no purpose.
Any chance of doing a deal with them to unite the right?
I don't want to do a deal with them. We're going to win the next election on our own.
In Toryland too, Reform upending rivals. Former Conservative MP Dame Andrea Jenkins becoming the first ever Reform mayor. Her win just the start, as Reform wrested councils from the Conservatives in Lincolnshire, Staffordshire, Lancashire, Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire and even Kent. The blue heartlands turning turquoise. The PM swerving the campaign trail, trying to get on with the job as Defender-in-Chief. Examining new weapons technology in Luton, now very clear-eyed about the political threat he's facing.
I get it. I do understand people want that change. We are delivering that change. I never pretended at the election last year there was some magic wand that I could pick up and change everything within a few months. That's what's happened for so many years. It'll take time.
But voters out of that as Labour put in their worst ever local election performance. The only crumb of comfort just clinging on to mayoralties in Doncaster, the west of England and North Tyneside. The Conservatives in near wipeout. Kemi Badenoch had only one place she could go, to Cambridgeshire, where former Peterborough MP Paul Bristow won that mayoral race.
We always knew that this was going to be a challenging election. I'd been saying that right from the minute that I became leader of the party late last year. And we are renewing our party, we are rebuilding, but it's going to be a long journey.
But the Lib Dems scooping up Tory territory too. Spectacular wins here in Shropshire in the west of England, celebrating council wins in Cambridgeshire and Oxfordshire too.
People are turning to the Liberal Democrats from both Labour and Conservative. The Conservative vote is in meltdown and it's coming to the Liberal Democrats. I think lifelong Conservatives now see us as a party that best represents their values.
These might be a relatively small set of elections, but my goodness, they are big in what they're telling us about the state of the country and how people are feeling. Because Nigel Farage has turned Reform from a protest party into one of local government. And when you look at the results, well, he's beaten Labour and the Conservatives hands down when it comes to vote share. One of his supporters said to me earlier, it's like he's turning a trickle into a tsunami. And if you re-ran these results into a general election, well, Nigel Farage's claim that he could become the next Prime Minister of this country doesn't look so much now like a pipe dream. These results, this man's moment. Farage has long been the disruptor in British politics, now taking on the two-party system with consequences no one can yet predict. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Durham.
Well, it is still a very busy night here and results are still coming in thick and fast. There's a couple I just want to bring you now. The first is Doncaster, because I can tell you that Reform have gained Doncaster Council from Labour. Not all of the areas have come in yet, but they've won already enough to take control of Doncaster Council. They've got 29 seats on the council. So far was Labour on 3, the Conservatives on 2. I should say this is the only council Labour is defending. They dominated here since 2009. They've always been the largest party there. That has now gone to Reform. And just while Beth was speaking there, I'm pretty sure I saw flash up that Hertfordshire Council also has gone from the Conservatives to no overall control, Conservative control since 2000, and really it is more evidence of a pretty miserable night for Cammy Badenoch, indeed, at Hertfordshire County Council. They're going to no overall control. Let's just bring you the state of the parties before we move on to our chat, shall we? Because this does give you the picture. All the way up in first place with 556 seats is Reform. They've also gained control of 8 councils. Second place is the Lib Dems. They put on 141 seats. They've won control of 3 councils. And just look at this for the Conservatives. They're down over 500 seats. They've lost control of all 15 councils that they were defending and that we've had the results for so far. Could it be a total wipeout? Labour also have lost control of the 1 council that they were defending, Doncaster, down 144 overall. Right, let's introduce everyone, shall we? It's a busy studio. Our duo for the evening, the former Conservative advisor, Sally Rushton, and the former Director of Communications and Strategy for the Labour Party, Tom Baldwin, also biographer of Keir Starmer, I should say. And 2 people who I'm guessing are probably quite familiar to you already. Sam Coates, our Deputy Political Editor, and lovely to have, as always, Sky News legend, Adam Bolton, now General Commentator on all things politics. Adam, to you first. We've had Nigel Farage iterations that have done well before, right? Brexit Party, UKIP. Are we witnessing something different today with Reform?
No, I think we're seeing a continuation. I mean, the last time we had an election result as shocking as this was Brexit, and who was one of the men behind it? It was Nigel Farage. He managed to take an issue which was of second issue importance to the British electorate, to define that as the central issue of British politics, and to win. And likewise, this time round, we've seen Nigel Farage with Brexit take the immigration issue, again, use that as the defining issue, get the other parties to fall in behind him, and he has won through on that. You know, my own feeling overall is that if one looks at what has changed, this is far, far more worrying for Labour, given where they were, than it was for the Conservatives. I mean, we knew the Conservatives were in intensive care waiting for a heart transplant from Reform UK. But in this case, what we've seen is an absolute collapse, even on the slightly shaky massive election victory, which Keir Starmer caused last time. And he appears to have absolutely no response to it. I mean, when he appeared this morning, first of all, apparently wanting to talk about apprenticeships, and then said, you know, what we've got to do is move quicker forward down the road we're already taking. I mean, I've lost count of the number of Labour people who are saying to me they're simply going in the wrong direction.
Well, I've got to put that to Tom Baldwin, because, look, I think we'll get on to the Conservatives and the, abysmal result we've seen for Cammy Badenoch so far, but it hasn't been great for Labour, has it? I mean, that Doncaster result is pretty bad.
I mean, it's worth saying that Labour did keep control, did keep the Doncaster mayoralty, but no, it's a really, really tough day for Labour, this. No bones about it. And they're facing some really tough music. They need to listen to that music. What they shouldn't do, though, is dance to Nigel Farage's tune. The big mistake here would be to say, well, because Nigel Farage is taking predominantly votes off the Conservative Party, not Labour Party, but predominantly his votes are coming from the Conservative Party, that somehow we have to move the entirety of politics onto Nigel Farage's ground, where he's strong, rather than actually pursue the Labour agenda. So what you've got coming up over the next few months are lots of things which Labour have been working on, whether it's the infrastructure strategy, the industrial strategy, the defence review. You've got a huge amount of policy which I think is very much Starmer's home ground, which he wants to talk about, rather than banging on about where people go to the toilet, these culture wars issues, or these sort of hugely exaggerated stories about immigration that Reform prosper from. So don't fight on his ground, listen to what the electorate are saying, but don't dance to his tune.
On the Conservatives, it feels we should talk about the Conservatives as well. Sam, what's your analysis of where we are right now with that?
So we knew from last year's general election that Reform UK really posed just an incredible, probably an existential threat to the Conservative Party. And I felt that the results today suggested that really has... I think that it would really have sharpened the mind of many Tory MPs. For me, what was striking was the geographical spread, the different types of Conservative voters that are now quite clearly turning to Reform. That there is no safe area, there is no home turf for the Conservative Party at the moment. And I think that when I listened to Kemi Badenoch respond to what had happened, she seemed to say that things were going in the right direction. There is no bit of today's results that were going in the right direction for her. I mean, I wonder whether some people on her own side might have felt just a touch of complacency over that. There are huge questions about what they do. I think Tom's question, or Tom's point, is absolutely the right one. For Labour, the dilemma will be whether or not to go on further on Reform territory. But that's also the question that the Tories have got to answer. And if they do go a little bit further to Reform UK, what's the difference between them and that party? Let's
put that to Sally. How do you think the Conservatives should respond?
I mean, it's a difficult one. I mean, Kemi has been in the job for 6 months. That isn't a long time. I mean, it probably feels like a long time to the electorate who are looking for policies. Well. Yes, it probably feels like a long time to all of us, to be honest. But yes, you have to take time to regroup, to come up with credible policies, to come up with a new vision that, yes, can attract some of those people who've left you for Reform, but without losing a load of people to the Lib Dems, to Labour, to elsewhere. I think the question might be whether that process needs to speed up, and in particular, whether she needs to have a clear policy position and articulate that again and again to the public well ahead of the next set of local elections.
Do you think, I mean, the same question that Tom was sort of addressing there with Keir Starmer, do you think that the Conservatives need to tack towards Reform and take them on their ground? Or do you think that actually you then risk, Lib Dems losing there?
I mean, you are stuck a bit between a rock and a hard place, aren't you? I mean, you tack too far to the right, it doesn't really feel credible. I mean, there are certain issues that the Conservatives need to grip, immigration being one of them. But I think there's no clear vision yet. I wish I had the answer. I think if I had the answer, I probably would have told Kemi and then she would have had a clearer vision. It's a difficult one. I don't think tacking even further to the right is the solution.
What's really interesting is that Kemi Badenoch has actually moved the Conservative Party closer to Reform UK already on things like immigration and on net zero. The big gaping hole between Reform UK and the Tories is actually on economics. What we've seen in the last couple of weeks from Nigel Farage in particular is a sort of, Farage the socialist, the guy who... I think Labour would say cosplays, but some would say sort of cozying up to the unions, talking about nationalising Scunthorpe and all of that. And that's the point of political difference. I mean, my question is, when I look at the polling, that's exactly where the public want. They want a socially conservative party that's economically actually a little bit more prepared to spend. Actually, are the Tories going in the wrong direction as a result of the Reform UK threat?
Yeah, but the problem is they can't go in that direction because of their record. They're not trusted on the economy, that we did have the Liz Truss interlude of apparently, spending or at least cutting taxes to promote growth. So the Conservatives don't have that option of going back on that because people can still remember it. I think...
Isn't that an argument for not having an economic policy at all? I mean, they have to have a stake in the ground in the economy. You might say it doesn't have credibility, but they've got to paint a picture, a vision on the economy, despite Liz Truss.
The position they feel most comfortable with is a small state tax-cutting display. But as you've just said, they can be outflanked on that with Farage, who hasn't been tested but can promise that somehow he can make things better.
And on immigration as well, it's a similar thing with the record that they have.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to look at this polling and look at exactly what's happening, because what you've got is a huge churning, volatile electorate. It's not that Labour are losing 10 points and they're going straight over to Reform. It's much more complicated than that. Labour are losing many, many more votes, according to every poll I've seen, if you look into the detail, to the Liberal Democrats and the Greens, than they are to Reform. It's the Conservative Party who are losing shed loads of votes over to Reform. Now, no, in Runcorn, clearly Labour lost some votes to Reform on a small turnout. Now, what does this mean? I mean, where Reform are doing well, it can be because there was a general protest, discontent. You know, one of the big issues on the doorstep was winter fuel allowance. Yeah. Another big issue on the doorstep was PIPs. It wasn't about immigration or woke.
I agree with you entirely, but the point I was trying to make, and I also agree with you about not dancing to UKIP's tune as far as Labour's intention. The Conservatives may have more issue. I think the problem is that in spite of being Prime Minister, in spite of winning this election, people are not listening to Keir Starmer at the moment. He has not got the initiative in British politics. And in dealing with the immigration issue, he hands the initiative back to Nigel Farage, which is a problem for him. And while I agree with you that he would say, we've got to press on, I'm doing all these things, that will reap dividends in due course.
Yeah, it can't become a sort of children's game of football that we're all chasing around after the same ball.
Well, it is a bit at the moment.
Well, no, there's a lot of space.
What's going to be the reaction to this? Labour are going to bring forward a tougher immigration bill.
I don't think that's a reaction. I think that's planned anyway, Adam.
Yeah, well, it's going to look like a reaction.
Yeah, well, it's going to look like a reaction, be presented a reaction. I mean, someone from Down Street said this to me. Part of their frustration is everything they do now is done through the prism, the media prism of, oh, this is a reaction to Nigel Farage, find Nigel Farage's surging poll lead and so on. And it's very difficult actually to tell your own story if the media just want to parrot this Farage story.
He ought to be able to command, and he is failing to command.
Well, look, I'm half with you. And I think there's a lot more space, particularly for a government, to make its own space. Yeah, I think in opposition you do have to follow the story of the day a bit more. In government, I think they can command the space and push things out into wider areas.
Really interesting. I think it does show just how difficult it is, genuinely, for both parties to react to the insurgents, the guys with no record. They can promise an awful lot and they can really capture a narrative as well. Very, very interesting. Lots more from both of you throughout the programme. You're watching Vote 2025, our Politics Hub special, coming up. Well, Nigel Farage might have a smile on his face, but he is becoming a bigger and bigger concern for Team Starmer. One of them, Pat McFadden, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, will be with us next.
we've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Nobody's talking.
Welcome back. Now, I'm pleased to say the Cabinet Office Minister and long-time Labour Party stalwart Pat McFadden is here with us now. Good to have you here. So much politics to discuss, but before we do, I did just want to get your reaction to the interview by Prince Harry. He, of course, has lost this case appealing over his security arrangements. He's actually called on Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, to get involved. What do you think he might?
I think he'll be quite reluctant to make a judgment about someone's personal security needs. We have experts who do that for a reason, and I'm not sure it's a good idea for any politician to be saying that that person requires this level or that level of security. And I think that's the issue at the heart of this, is a disagreement about what level of security is needed. So it's for experts to judge. You know, I don't think we should interfere with their assessment. And I think it's probably a bad idea for politicians to start saying, we disagree with that assessment and it should be this level rather than that level.
Prince Harry's also said there's an establishment stitch-up. Do you think he's right?
Look, it was a court case. And I think another wise thing, I'm not trying to be evasive, is for politicians probably not to describe the results of court cases as establishment stitch-ups.
Thank you very much. I understand your point there loud and clear. Let's talk, shall we, about the results we've seen over the last 24 hours. You lost the parliamentary by-election in Runcorn. You've lost control of Doncaster Council, a council where you really have been dominant in for a long time. These are poor results for you. You must be disappointed.
Yeah, of course we are. And I think when you get poor results, there's no point in soft soaping it or trying to dance around it. They're poor results. Anybody can see that looking at them. And you've got to take that on the chin when you're in government. This happens at local elections sometimes. And you've got to respond to it. And look, taking a step back from it, I understand people's sense of anger and frustration. We've had 10 years or more of low economic growth, living standards not rising, people's taxes have gone up. They don't feel they're getting the benefit from that in terms of good public services. Now, in recent months, we have started to see some change on that front. We've started to see waiting lists coming down. We've started to see interest rates coming down, which will help homeowners. We've started to see the breakfast clubs. But I'm not going to tell you that people are feeling that yet. So we've got to keep our foot on the gas and keep changing things. And the critical heart of it is people want to see their living standards go up and those waiting lists go down.
You talked there about people feeling like they've had a rough ride for a long time, which I think a lot of people would recognise. But I guess what I am really intrigued by is the speed at which your vote seems to have changed from the general election last year when you did really well and this time when people seem to be losing confidence in you already. I mean, that's a quick turnaround. It was almost as if, you promised to be the change party, but without a programme for change. No one's felt the change you promised.
Well, we do have a programme for change, but people are impatient. You're right about that. And I understand why they're impatient, because the impatience didn't start on the 4th of July last year. This has been building up for a long time.
But do you take responsibility for that loss of faith? Because I feel like Labour are very good at pointing to, we've had this very difficult inheritance. But you should take responsibility for that loss of faith that people have had in you, shouldn't you?
Well, look, I don't think all the anger and frustration is just 10 months old. So I'm not just going to say, take responsibility for...
Yeah, I'm not asking you for taking responsibility for Liz Truss's budget or anything, don't get me wrong, but I'm saying take responsibility for the fact people feel let down by this government.
Do understand people's sense of frustration. They want to see more. And that's what the Prime Minister meant today when he said, I get it, I understand people are angry and frustrated. We too are impatient.
And so we have got to keep changing to get living standards up and waiting lists down and make sure that people feel the benefit of what we're doing.
When I speak to people who are in reform, door knocking and campaigning, one thing that they've told me comes up time and time again against Labour was the changes to winter fuel. The Labour Mayor of Doncaster, Ros Jones, someone who knows a difficult fight when she sees one, right? She says Keir Starmer needs to listen to the Labour voices calling for a U-turn over winter fuel. Was that policy a mistake?
Look, if you make any change in a revenue policy like that, you've got to say how you're going to pay for it. And the truth is, we made a decision to focus the winter fuel payment on the lowest income pensioners and to raise the basic state pension in line with the triple lock. It's just going up starting last month.
So it sounds like you don't think it was a mistake.
Over £400 a year. All I say is, you can point to any single individual policy, and I'm in Parliament all the time, and people say, I like your investment in the NHS, I like your investment in transport and housing, but I don't like these things you've done on revenue, whether it's this tax, that benefit
this is
change.
And I accept what you say, difficult decisions have to be balanced, but winter fuel, it feels to me, and I've seen polling on this as well, we did it on the Politics Hub, where it's a policy that everyone knows about and nobody likes. It's an outlier. Was it a mistake?
Look, I used to do interviews before the election, and journalists sitting in chairs like yours were saying to me, why are you paying this winter fuel payment to better off pensioners when you could be using that money for something else? Whenever you take a decision like this, there will be a reaction to it. When I look at it in the round, we had a tough situation. We had a lot of stuff to sort out. Some of the decisions we've taken to sort those things out have been unpopular. I don't deny that. But we are now starting to see some benefit, waiting lists falling, more help for parents, a better situation for homeowners with falling interest rates, precisely because we sorted things out and we've got some economic stability. And what we need to see in the future is more change that people can feel.
Can I talk to you for a moment about reform? Because it is really the story of the last 24 hours. They've taken votes from you, they've taken many more votes from the Conservative Party, of course. Do you see them now as your main opposition?
I think politics is changing. I think the argument is going to change. One of the interesting things for me during the last few weeks of these local elections is watching this crisis of confidence play out in the Tory party, where the whole campaign seemed to be about, should we merge with reform, should we deal with reform, should we become reform? Remember, this is one of the most successful parties in Western democratic history. It now clearly doesn't believe that it can win. And I think that is an extraordinary development. And one of the interesting things for me is, what will the future battle therefore be? I thought Andrea Jenkins made an interesting comment in her victory speech at the podium. And she said, we're going to reset Britain's past. And I think this is going to be a big part of the debate in the future. We're in a fast-changing world. We've got a changing security situation here in Europe, a changing trade picture, massive technological change. If the battle in the future is one side saying they want to rewind the clock and another side saying we're going to lead you into the future, we're going to make the most of these changes, and we're going to try to have Britain best placed in this changing world, then that's a battle that we will welcome.
I wonder if you might agree that there's been a slight complacency about reform from Labour in the past.
I don't think so. I'm never complacent.
I'm not talking about you, but
I used to sit in chairs like this when we were winning by-elections last year, and journalists would say, well, you've got it in the bag, the general election. I never called the election. I never said that by-elections or local elections added up to the same thing as that decision about who's going to lead the country.
But I guess it does just feel, with reform, there has perhaps been a feeling that they were a threat to the Conservatives, not so much for Labour. You know, even an interview this week that I did, just 2 days ago with Hadi Alexander, I asked if Labour were worried about the threat of reform. She said, oh, no, the polling isn't reflected on the doorstep. Well, I don't know what doorstep she's been knocking on, but these results tell a bit of a different story to that.
Look, I think those of us who are interested very much in these kind of battles and these kind of arguments are always curious about how the picture is changing. And I said very quickly after the general election that I thought politics was changing. I don't quite know what the force on the right that we are going to be fighting in a couple of years is going to be, because that debate is taking place. I do know there'll be a centre-left party focused on delivering for the country and focused very much on the future, and it won't be standing up and saying the answer to Britain's challenges is to turn the clock back, because that's no answer at all.
I'm not sure if he'll welcome me bringing him into this, but Tom Baldwin here was just saying about the importance in his mind about Labour not dancing to Reform's tune, effectively, to not feeling that you have to kind of tack to the right. I mean, is that something that you agree with? Because obviously there has been a focus on immigration from Labour.
Look, it's a concern for voters, especially illegal immigration through the boats. But my basic approach to politics is not to slice and dice and chase individual segments of the electorate. Rather, it's to have a big argument about the future direction of the country. That's what we do when we win. That's what we do when we're at our best. And that's what I hope that we do in the future.
Final question. Who's more of a threat to Labour? Kemi Badenoch or Nigel Farage?
Let me borrow a phrase from football. You can only play the team that's in front of you. I don't quite know what that team's going to be, but we'll be ready for the fight.
Come on, we can give me more than that.
Look, that's what I believe. The best way in politics is control what you can. And what we can control is the direction, the argument, the posture of the Labour Party. Let the argument on the right play out. OK, thanks very much indeed. Thank you.
Well, you're watching a Vote 2025 Politics Hub special coming up. After local elections defeat for the Conservatives, how much blame can be laid at the door of Kemi Badenoch? We'll be asking that next. Welcome back to our special Politics Hub programme. We can hear now from our data and economics editor, Ed Conway. He's been crunching all of the data today. There's lots of results coming in, lots of numbers to go through. Here's Ed.
Quite a lot of divergent stories, actually, here. Kind of three big narratives that are worth just getting through. The first of them was what happened in Runcorn when it came to the by-election results. We had those by-election results at Runcorn, and it was quite striking. It was striking, the numbers, when they came through. I'm kind of waiting for them to actually be loaded up on the screen. But when we had those numbers through, just what a tight result that was in Runcorn. We hadn't seen anything like that really going back to pretty much the kind of Victorian era. And as a result of that, pretty striking. Now, I have to just pause right now because the buttons on my iPad are not quite working and it's not responding, Sophie. So here I am. And without
Come
data,
on, Ed,
without charts.
Come on, it's
without
like
charts, I basically have nothing.
This is it. It's lost without a screen. It's like, without the screen.
But without the charts, I literally have nothing.
Oh,
so
it's mine, perhaps.
Interpretive
So there we are. There you have it. It was a big deal. There were lots of numbers.
I'm really disappointed.
You saw them earlier.
I love an Echo chart. We've been having them all day, and now on the post. Well, we'll try and get back on later. Don't worry. Right. In the meantime, I'm going to rescue Ed by taking you somewhere else, because the Conservatives have spent the last few weeks in full expectation management mode, telling everyone who could hear them that this big electoral test was going to be a tough time, and so it proved. They lost control of 13 of the 23 councils that were in contention. Kemi Badenoch exacted the country is not yet ready to trust her party. Sky's political correspondent Rob Powell reports.
From Lincolnshire to Oxfordshire and in other shires around the country, defeat for the Conservatives. Grimsby turned from the Tories to Labour last year. Now it's Reform making strides in the region.
At the moment, they seem to be singing the right songs for the country, and that appeals to people.
I think that Reform they'll be able to make a lot of difference, because the others can't. They're just selfish, lying.
I like Nigel Farage. I think he's for the UK in general. He's got some good beliefs. He wants to progress. He believes in England a bit more, doesn't he?
From this senior Tory, an acknowledgement of the bleak situation.
It is painful and it is difficult for us, but I think we have to put this into the context of where we are as a party. Where we are as a political party, we had the worst ever general election result last year for my party in our history. And so we are rebuilding. We are absolutely rebuilding.
Other MPs are privately more scathing of Kemi Badenoch, accusing her of not setting out a vision to sell the nation or building a proper campaigning machine. Home to the ruins of the town's castle, Kenilworth is Warwickshire's last remaining Conservative MP too. But the Tories have now lost control of the county council here, under siege on several fronts.
Warwickshire really shows the big problem the Conservatives have. Here and further south, they're losing support to the Lib Dems, while in the north of the county, it's reform that's the threat. Two separate parties hoovering up disillusioned Tories from opposite ends of the political spectrum.
There are plenty of marginal constituencies in this part of the Midlands, so for the Tories, losing here means you're likely losing everywhere.
They just need to regroup, don't they, and get some street cred back. That's all. The reform have got to prove themselves. They're very good at speaking, but we'll have to see what they can do.
I did vote for Boris once, which was Conservative, when he promised to cut down on immigrants, which he didn't. It's the only time I voted Conservative, was for Boris.
But reform this time?
Yes, reform this time, yeah.
Feels like a lot of people are turning away from the main parties towards some of those smaller ones.
We're disenchanted with what's gone on, firstly with all the whole Conservative thing, and then what the Labour Party have done since they got in.
So as the Lib Dems swallow up swathes of Middle England and Reform continue their advance, what can the Tories do? Conservative MPs want action, but this Tory pollster says it will take time.
I think the first pressure for the Conservatives will be to come up with more clear policies. I was absolutely clear from day one that the Conservatives were going to lose a lot of seats because they were defending so many from 2021. And as I say, turning a supertank around takes a long time.
Time may be on the Tories' side, but the party seems surrounded. The route out far from clear. Rob Powell, Sky News in Warwickshire.
Let's chat again to Sally and Tom, shall we? You know, it's quite striking, isn't it, when you hear some of those former Conservative voters or people who are voting for reform this time, and just the disenchantment they've got with the Conservatives. You know, it does feel like they're not going to be ready to give you guys another chance for quite some time.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's what people are hearing on the doorstep. And we're a year on from a historic defeat. It's completely understandable that people are still angry. It's going to take years to rebuild that trust. I don't think anyone thinks that's an overnight job. I mean, it's scary when you look at those numbers, speaking candidly. It really is quite frightening. And it's easy to panic, but I just don't think people should lose their heads.
Yeah, you say there it's easy to panic, but that's not what I should do. I mean, there will be some people in your party who'll be ready for a change of leader already. What would you say?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you know, if I were a councillor who'd been up all night and pounding the pavements for weeks to find myself turfed out, I'd be pretty upset. Like, wouldn't any of us be upset to be out of a job? But, I mean, firstly, as a factual point, only MPs can get rid of Kemi, and there is no appetite for doing that right now. She's been leader for 6 months. You need to give her time to bed in. You need to give her time to come up with policies. I don't sense any real appetite from Conservative MPs for more turmoil, because as a party, you've got to rebuild trust and confidence. You're not going to do that by chucking out another leader.
Look, what we've got is an incredibly volatile electorate now. You know, back in 1997, 75% of people always vote the same way. Now it's 35%. And you saw in 2019 when the Brexit Party, the forerunner to Reform Party, topped the poll. The Conservative Party in that election got 8%. 6 months later, they won a landslide under Boris Johnson. I mean, politics are moving all over the place.
That's very reassuring.
I guess what I mean is that it may be that this is the end of the Conservative Party, and it may not. But people pronouncing the end of two-party politics are as dumb as saying two-party politics is going to be there forever. What the moment is you can't predict anything, and you've got a first-past-the-post system which tends to accentuate and amplify sudden surges, Reform getting 25, 26, 27% of the vote, and it seems like the whole ground beneath us is shaking. Is that a better or worse performance than the Brexit Party in 2019? It's worse. So I think we just have to kind of have a bit of perspective. We've seen this before.
At the same time, though, they've got... And I do take your point, but, it does feel to me like the thing that struck me today is Reform's ability to convert, piling up those votes to, winning by-elections. They've now got 5 MPs, 6 if you count the guy who got, kicked out since the last election. They've taken control of councils. It feels something different. Do you think that's fair?
They've taken control for now, but now they've got to prove themselves. Because the fundamental challenge they have is a lot of their people haven't proven they can run a bath, never mind a local authority. And this is an enormous challenge. These are massive, multi-billion-pound organisations that deal with seismic issues like adult social care. You get that wrong, people are not going to be happy with you. So actually, this is the start of Reform's journey to prove themselves.
Yeah, very quickly.
If you look at what Reform stood at the last election, their policies are bonkers. You're talking about cutting the state pension for hundreds and hundreds of pounds and puts winter fuel allowance into nothing, right? So they're now in power in some places. You'll see whether their bonkers, unfeasible, unworkable policies actually mean anything. So there's actually a test for them here.
Interesting point. So much more to discuss. It honestly has been such an interesting set of results. Not many councils up, but blimey, it really has told a story. Lots more to come in the next hour. We're still going. Don't go anywhere. We'll try again with Editor's Charts. To the BBC. Well, let's bring in the former Press Secretary to the Queen, Elsa Anderson. Great to have you with us. What did you make of Prince Harry's interview?
I thought it was quite extraordinary, actually, on a day where we're all focusing on politics and elections, and this has come completely out of the blue. So I was actually quite astounded that he'd given this interview to the BBC and talked so openly and quite rawly about how he feels and what he's doing at the moment.
Do you feel sorry for him? How do you feel towards him when you listen to what he's got to say?
Well, I worked for the late Queen for 13 years. I was a member of the royal household. I've got a deep sense of sadness about what I hear with Prince Harry, because the Prince Harry that I knew when I worked there was a very different person to what he is at the moment. This was the guy who was loved by the media. He was adored. He was almost, he was more accessible than Prince William. Prince William was more of the sort of more, stoical, king in waiting, when Harry was the cheeky chappy. And now hearing him speak, and I'm a daughter of a naval officer. I was married to a naval officer. He talks about how much camaraderie there is in the military. I know the military were really upset when he wrote Spare and talked about the Taliban and how many Taliban he took out, because it actually puts their lives at risk. So there's a real difficulty here, I think, with what he's saying now to what he said previously.
Yeah, it's interesting. In the interview, he acknowledges the anger, I guess, that the book caused, as you pointed out. You've obviously worked very closely with Buckingham Palace over your time, and how do you think they'll be reacting to this interview?
I think they'll be raising their eyes heavenwards, to be honest, because it's yet another thing. And actually, Prince Harry talking about his father's health. We've all been hearing these really positive messages about King Charles III, and how he's going forward and how he's, really embracing life and, and stepping up. And yet now Prince Harry is saying, I don't know how long my father has. So that's going to cause real concern and more speculation in the media and the wider public about what his diagnosis is, which is incredibly unhelpful going forward.
And at the same time, he also says, Prince Harry, that he wants a reconciliation, that his dad, very sadly, won't speak to him, and he wants that to change. Do you think that this has increased the chances of that or decreased them?
Well, Sophie, we only hear one side of the story. How do we not know that the King Charles has reached out to Harry? We know they've met when King Charles was diagnosed firstly with the cancer. What you don't want to do is have your private life played out in the media. So if you really truly want reconciliation, you will do it in private. You won't do it, on a BBC, news interview.
Yeah, it's a fair point. He also described the court defeat as a good old-fashioned establishment stitch-up. Do you think that he's got a point? What's your reaction to what he's got to say there?
No, I'm not part of the establishment. I worked in the royal household for 13 years. I'm a good comprehensive schoolgirl. So no, absolutely not. And also, the royal household can't dictate what the courts of law will say and decide. So no, I completely disagree with that. Absolutely not.
I love the good old comprehensive schoolgirl sneaking into Buckingham Palace. That's great, isn't it? I was intrigued, just to end, with how you were talking about the sense of sadness about the Harry you see now and the Harry that you knew when you did work for the royal family, and you talked about how his perception in the media had changed. Did you know him? What was he like then?
Oh my gosh, I did know him. I was incredibly fortunate to know him and Prince William. I was very, very lucky to actually post the announcement of Prince George when he was born on the railings of Buckingham Palace. What a complete honour for me. So the Harry that I knew was a very relaxed, amazing, supportive, committed member of the royal family. A military man, somebody who was, really part of the firm. And if you remember, Sophie, when William and Catherine first got together, it was the Fab Three, wasn't it? It was the three of them going out and doing all this amazing stuff with mental health, with Heads Together. They really were a unit. They were the future of the monarchy, and it saddens me now that we're here with this, complete discord between all of them. And I'm a great believer in reconciliation. I think you need to reconcile it in private and not, play it out in the media.
I think the sadness that you talk about there is something that lots of people will really agree with, and it will resonate with them as well. Thank you very much indeed for coming on the programme tonight.
Thank you.
Just want to bring you some breaking news about the local elections because the Conservatives have lost control of Buckinghamshire Council. And I'm going to be completely honest with you. At the beginning of the day, when people are saying the Conservatives could face a wipeout and not hold on to any of their councils, I was thinking they're not going to lose Buckinghamshire. I don't think that's going to happen. Well, they have lost control of Buckinghamshire County Council. I just want to give you a bit of a sense of what council that is. So it's been under Conservative control since 1973. UKIP did pretty well back in 2013, but of course, the story here, as so many other places as well, is reform really eating into it before. In the 2024 election, of course, the Conservatives often also lost a few Buckinghamshire seats, Chesham and Amersham, for example, to the Lib Dems, who do well in Buckinghamshire as well. But at the minute, Buckinghamshire has been lost to no overall control. I should say we don't have the full council result in yet. We just know that the Conservatives are not going to be able to form a majority. They started with a majority of 57 seats. They only had, with only 5 seats left, the Conservatives have lost control of that council. Just want to have a look now at the state of the parties because this is an extraordinary changing picture that we are seeing. Reform have gained 593 seats. They've gained control of 8 councils in total. The Lib Dems have had a pretty good night as well. They have gained 141 seats. They've also gained control of 3 councils. So again, what we're seeing is the splintering of the two-party system where Labour and the Conservatives have been dominant. The Conservatives have been pushed into 3rd place, and remember that they were defending a vastly superior number of council seats and councils. They are down 574 seats. They've lost control of all of the 17. They've lost control of all of the 17 councils they were defending, including Buckinghamshire, which is a real shock. Not a great night for Labour as well, though. They've lost 172 seats, and they've lost control of the 1 council that they were defending as well in Doncaster. I just want to bring you one more result, because we are hearing that Reform have gained control of Northamptonshire from the Conservatives. For the Conservatives to lose control, they would need to have lost 20 seats. So that is a big swing we're talking about. They've not just lost control, it's gone switched to Reform. This really does feel to me like it is momentous, and this is really at the upper end of the worst Conservative fears. So far, the Conservatives have not managed to hold on to a single one of the 17 councils they were defending. Well, let's get the view now, shall we, from the Conservative Party. I'm joined by the Shadow Levelling Up Secretary, David Simmons. I mean, I can only apologise for the timing of your interview, because you are talking to us just off the back of the Conservatives losing Northamptonshire and also Buckinghamshire. I mean, these are a devastating set of results for you.
Today doesn't make happy reading for my party. It certainly doesn't make happy reading for the Labour Party, who had a real surge in Buckinghamshire in last year's general election.
Oh, come on. You know what, I can talk about the Labour Party to Labour, but at the minute you have lost control of all 17 councils you're defending in England.
And I'm very sorry for the many Conservative councillors, having been one for 24 years, who, despite how hard they worked all across the country for delivering for their local residents, have lost their seats today. And it's a clear message to my party that although there were some bright spots, like winning the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough mayoralty, which was a bit of a surprise coming from behind Labour, beating Reform into 2nd place and Labour into 3rd, that we have a lot of work to do. And what Kemi Badenoch set out, although it's had some positive reviews from some voters on the doorsteps, we still need to do that work to make sure we've got a clear, credible programme that the voters welcome for government.
You just said that there were some bright spots with the plural. I just wonder if you could name some others other than that mayoralty, please.
Yeah, we remain by quite a large margin ahead of Reform as a party in local government. We remain a very significant presence in councils, many of which, although they've been Conservative for a while...
You're a larger presence in Reform in local government because most of the seats went up this time. They've got way more seats than you in the ones that were up today.
Yeah, and today's elections were last fought at the height of Conservative Party popularity in government.
But you can't say one of the bright spots of this set of elections was the, results that were fought, last year or in 2022 or 2023. That doesn't make any sense at all.
I know up and down the country we have a lot of Conservative colleagues who weren't up for election, who are very focused on doing what their residents need. They'll be looked at the results that have happened. They'll be looking at what happened in the campaigns. They'll be looking at the policies. They'll be looking at the developments that took place, and making sure that they take those things into account. And we need to make sure that, given our very extensive track record of being a successful party in local government, of running really good councils that provide efficient services at a low tax rate, that we make sure that we take that message forward and we hear what the voters are saying, which is very mixed in different parts of the country. We know Reform have won some voters by promising wholesale nationalisation, other voters by promising to be more pro-business. Now, those two things simply are not credible together as a plan for government. So we need to look at what other parties are saying as well and make sure that what emerges from this is a stronger Conservative Party with a clear plan that's one that the voters support.
Is this existential for the Conservative Party?
No, not remotely. And I think it's very clear, somebody who was a Conservative councillor for 24 years, that we've been at a much lower level in local government than is the case now. And that's not to take away from the...
I just want to come in again, because I just think it's really important to talk about the results today. There were only 23 councils that have come back today. So obviously, you're going to be at at higher levels or lower levels before because lots of these seats weren't being fought. But of these seats now, you've lost every single council so far that you were defending, and Reform are way ahead of you in terms of seats and councils.
Well, Buckinghamshire, which you mentioned, we are by a large margin the largest party, although it's clear that we're not going to have an overall majority. It's my next-door neighbouring council. I know they've been doing a brilliant job there. Now, clearly, there's a lot been going on in this election. Voters have been expressing huge dissatisfaction with politics. And we need to make sure, as the party of opposition, that we're listening to that. We're hearing exactly what it is that people are concerned about, because sometimes, particularly when you've got populist parties around, it sounds like it's simple messages, and we need to be sure that we're being straight with the voters about the challenges that the country faces and that the policies that we're advocating are ones that work. And I know those Conservative councillors went into this election with a sound financial basis, with policy programmes that were fully costed and that were deliverable in office. I really regret the fact they're not going to get the chance to do that. And we need to take the opportunity now to think, what do we need to learn from this? How do we make sure that we come back as a stronger party? Because the country needs that effective opposition in Parliament for the time being. And it also needs to make sure that it's got a really effective opposition party that's able and ready to take over when the voters and all our local public services need it.
You are very clear that part of the way forward for the Conservatives is scrutinising Reform, and from the sounds of it, you feel that they're promising different things to different people. Some of the things you say are unrealistic. I guess my question is, what does the Conservatives need to do differently? Do you need to be focusing on different areas? What do you need to do as a party?
Victory for the Conservative Party has always come from the centre ground. It's about being a party with a credible, financially stable programme for government. And our country's been through a lot with COVID and the impact of the war in Ukraine in the last few years, which have been hugely challenging for people's standards of living. And it's very clear from the outcome of these local elections, from last year's general election, that voters want to see something different. They want to see that sense of optimism alongside the sense of patriotism that the Conservative and other parties have sought to express. And we need to look at that programme. We need to look at what's going on in other countries to learn from things that are working and some things that are not working quite so well, and make sure that that programme is credible. And if we look at this election as one where Reform are the main challenges, they have a programme of 300 billion of extra spending and tax cuts. Those things are simply not credible. We need to make sure that the Conservative Party can set out what it is we want to do in government, how much that will cost, and to demonstrate that we've got the experience and the insight to deliver it in office.
And what would your message be to some of your colleagues who may be feeling that actually, you know what, it's time for a change of leader? We've got Robert Jenwer waiting in the rings, perhaps.
I'm not aware of any colleagues who do feel that. I know certainly in the Parliamentary Party, we've been working very closely together for a long time. I'm a member of the Whip's office. We talk to colleagues about this. There's a very strong sense that we need to work together. United parties are not ones that prosper. There are different views, different opinions. Robert Jenrick's been doing a very good job in the portfolio that he has, holding the government to account, as people like Chris Philp, an excellent job of holding the government's feet to the fire over their failures on people coming across the channel as illegal migrants. We need to make sure that collectively we've got a credible team. So as the voters look at the state of their lives, the state of their local community, and say, right, we want change. We want to look for a party that's got the right ideas and the right policies, that we're ready and waiting to demonstrate that we are that party.
Thank you very much indeed. Great to have you on the Politics Hub this evening. Well, of course, aside from the elections, as we've been discussing, the big developing story tonight is this new interview given by Prince Harry. And while we're just chatting then, we've had a statement from Prince Harry. Let's try and find out what it is he said. We can go to Rachel Venables, who's following the story for us. Rachel, what's happened?
Well, it's a very lengthy statement that follows hot on the heels, of course, of that very lengthy interview that Prince Harry gave a little earlier today to the BBC, in which he expressed his great sense of disappointment, I think a real bitterness about his loss at the Court of Appeal today, attempting to overturn that decision back in 2020 to downgrade his security once it was announced that he and his wife Meghan would be moving to the US, as they did eventually, certainly stepping away from royal duties and stepping away from their life in the UK. We had a very short statement in response to that response by him by Buckingham Palace, talking about how all of the issues, they said, have been examined meticulously, repeatedly and meticulously by the courts, with that same conclusion reached on each occasion that it moved through the courts. And now in response to that single line, we have a very lengthy statement from Prince Harry in which he says, and this is one of the key lines, I think, that he has still profound concerns over the issue about the way everything's been handled, and he says he will be writing to the Home Secretary, to Yvette Cooper, to ask her to urgently examine the matter and review the RAVEC process. And RAVEC is the body that are responsible for the protection of high-profile individuals, particularly, of course, the royal family. He talks at the start of this statement that the process has only ever been, he says, about ensuring my safety. This is something he said repeatedly in that BBC interview, talking about how he doesn't feel safe enough really to come to the UK. That's clearly a struggle for him. But he says to bring his wife, to bring his children, it's clear he feels as though that is not possible as things currently stand. He says, and it's that about my immediate family when we're in the United Kingdom so that we may safely visit my home. He talks further down the statement, I'm just reading it now, about the legal action being a last resort, but he claims it's one that has uncovered, in his words, shocking truths. And this is particularly about the way the royal household are, in his mind, and to his understanding, key decision makers on RAVEC. And when it came to that committee that made that decision back in 2020, early 2020, to downgrade his security. And so clearly this loss today has only spurred him on further, first with that interview, and clearly also to take this measure of writing to the Home Secretary and asking, almost taking the political route of trying to get that process reviewed.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Rachel Venables there with the latest on Prince Harry. Right, well, let's stop and take a breath, shall we? Because, of course, on the political front, we are discussing the fallout from the English elections tonight. Here is our political editor, Beth Rigby, now with the story of the day, a warning that her report does contain some flash photography.
Just 6 votes in it. Nigel Farage's Reform winning the Runcorn by-election on the slightest of margins in a victory of massive significance. Reform on the march, not just here, but right across the country. Its popularity surge in the polls now translating into real power. We've just left Runcorn, where Reform have won that by-election by 6 votes. And I've just made a few phone calls and got a tip-off that the next place I should be heading to is Durham, big Labour territory. Reform think they've done very well in the council elections there, so we've got to get up there. Farage on a victory tour, taking him across the Red Wall, greeting jubilant supporters in Durham, where Labour had dominated local politics for a century until now. What's your message to Kemi Badenoch and what's your message to Keir Starmer?
The message to Keir Starmer, sarcastically, is please keep doing what you're doing. And the message to Kemi Badenoch is, well, frankly, the Conservative Party's finished today. It's gone. It's dying in the shires. It has no future. It stands for nothing. It serves no purpose.
Any chance of doing a deal with them to unite the right?
I don't want to do a deal with them. We're going to win the next election on our own.
In Toryland too, Reform upending rivals. Former Conservative MP Dame Andrea Jenkins becoming the first ever Reform mayor. Her win just the start, as Reform wrested councils from the Conservatives in Lincolnshire, Staffordshire, Lancashire, Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire and even Kent. The blue heartlands turning turquoise. The PM swerving the campaign trail, trying to get on with the job as Defender-in-Chief. Examining new weapons technology in Luton, now very clear-eyed about the political threat he's facing.
I get it. I do understand people want that change. We are delivering that change. I never pretended at the election last year there was some magic wand that I could pick up and change everything within a few months. That's what's happened for so many years. It'll take time.
But voters out of that as Labour put in their worst ever local election performance. The only crumb of comfort just clinging on to mayoralties in Doncaster, the west of England and North Tyneside. The Conservatives in near wipeout. Kemi Badenoch had only one place she could go, to Cambridgeshire, where former Peterborough MP Paul Bristow won that mayoral race.
We always knew that this was going to be a challenging election. I'd been saying that right from the minute that I became leader of the party late last year. And we are renewing our party, we are rebuilding, but it's going to be a long journey.
But the Lib Dems scooping up Tory territory too. Spectacular wins here in Shropshire in the west of England, celebrating council wins in Cambridgeshire and Oxfordshire too.
People are turning to the Liberal Democrats from both Labour and Conservative. The Conservative vote is in meltdown and it's coming to the Liberal Democrats. I think lifelong Conservatives now see us as a party that best represents their values.
These might be a relatively small set of elections, but my goodness, they are big in what they're telling us about the state of the country and how people are feeling, because Nigel Farage has turned Reform from a protest party into one of local government. And when you look at the results, well, he's beaten Labour and the Conservatives hands down when it comes to vote share. One of his supporters said to me earlier, it's like he's turning a trickle into a tsunami. And if you re-ran these results into a general election, well, Nigel Farage's claim that he could become the next Prime Minister of this country doesn't look so much now like a pipe dream. These results, this man's moment. Farage has long been the disruptor in British politics, now taking on the two-party system with consequences no one can yet predict. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Durham.
Well, let's hear now, shall we, from our data and economics editor, Ed Conway, who's been crunching all the data today.
Well, it's a big political moment, but it's also a big data moment when you look at some of the numbers that we've had here. And in a sense, there's three narratives intertwined here. We've got that by-election result that we heard about, first of all, in Runcorn, a massive win for Reform with an enormous swing in terms of the vote. But perhaps most striking of all, have a look at this, the majority of 6. That is basically the tightest we have ever seen. And I want to show you, actually. Let me show you just a bit of historical context here. Looking back at the closest by-elections in modern history, in living memory, there is really nothing to compare with it. Maybe something kind of about 100 years ago, but nonetheless, 6. These are all really tight results. This is an incredibly knife-edge result. We've never seen anything at all like it, but nonetheless, it went for Reform, so that by-election starting that particular story. And then, of course, we've had all these mayoral results as well. And again, it's Reform in Greater Lincolnshire, Reform in Hull and East Yorkshire as well. The Conservatives there hanging on in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And actually, in the west of England, Labour doing better than expected, the Greens not doing quite as well as expected. But still, just look at that light blue there. And if we look at this, not just the mayoral results, not just that by-election, but also the share of seats in the local elections, because here you're talking about across the shires in England. Historically, and we're going back to the 1970s here, historically, just look at how dominant the Conservatives were and then Labour as well. So Conservatives and Labour there really dominating with the vast majority of all of the seats that are won there. And now we have this result here. Just look at Reform. They're completely tearing that apart. And if I show it in one other way, what we'll do is we'll take that and that, so the results, all of these seats for Labour and for the Conservatives, look back over history and just see how much of the share they had. And indeed, for most of history, it's been utter two-party dominance all the way through to where we are now. A complete sea change. And even 2013, which was good for UKIP, they never managed to contend with that. So that is an enormous issue. And when you look at what this might imply across the country as a whole, which we can do, because Michael Thrasher has gone through the numbers, worked out what the national estimated share would be, and it is incredibly striking. Let me just give you a bit of context to this. This is the first time that not the Conservatives, not the Labour Party have been in front here. So it's the first time that that's two-party dominance of this national estimated share, going back basically in living memory, that Reform or indeed any other third party has been ahead. And just look how far ahead. 32% share versus 19% for the Labour Party, 18% for the Conservative Party, and the Lib Dems there actually up a little bit at 16%. A really striking set of results that completely changes the picture of politics in this country.
Ed, thank you very much indeed. Ed Conway there with all the data you need to know. Right, Let's speak now, shall we, to the Liberal Democrats. I'm pleased to say joining us now is their culture spokesperson, the MP Max Wilkinson, live in Cheltenham for us. Max, what do you make of the results?
Thanks, Sophie. Thanks for having me on. I think this is a really good set of results for the Liberal Democrats. It's clear that we've beaten the Conservatives. We are now becoming the party of Middle England. We're on track to beat them at the next general election as well. And if you look at the places where we've done really well today, places like Gloucestershire, where I am, where we wiped out the Conservatives in my seat in Cheltenham, but Oxfordshire as well, across Devon, into Shropshire, where we had an absolutely storming result. We're clearly replacing the Conservatives as the party of Middle England. And what's more, our vote has held up really, really well in places where Reform has contested too.
Can I... This might be a bit of a stupid question, but I've been hearing this an awful lot from Lib Dems today, that you're the party of Middle England. What does that mean? What is the party of Middle England? What's Middle England?
There's definitely not a stupid question, Sophie. No such thing. So there's a whole group of people who in the past were just looking for sort of sensible, centre-ground, moderate politics. They just wanted people to be competent, to engage with them on the things that they care about, things like the NHS, things like social care, and things like the potholes in the streets, the local dentist and GP surgeries. And the Liberal Democrats have been doing that. Last year, obviously, we had a record-breaking result in the general election where we got 72 MPs, and we're not that far behind the Conservatives in Parliament now. And since then, people in our local communities have seen that you get hard-working Liberal Democrat community champions who are focusing on those bread-and-butter issues that most people are voting on, and rather than some of the more sort of spurious things that the Conservatives have got distracted by over the last few months and years.
What's really striking about this set of elections is the two parties that have dominated for so many years, Labour and the Conservatives, really shedding votes to the insurgents reform and also to yourselves as well, of course. You've been a beneficiary of that too. How do you feel seeing reform do so well today?
Well, it won't surprise you to hear, Sophie, that I don't have anything in common with the Reform Party and Nigel Farage, and nor do the Liberal Democrats. But we can only control what is going on with our own game, right? And it's not up to us what the Conservatives and Reform are doing and whether they're having chats. Clearly, I don't want the Reform Party to win. I don't want the Conservatives to win either. And the Tories and Reform have been cozying up to one another. You've got Kemi Badenoch and Robert Jenrick basically echoing the sort of points that Reform is making. And in places like Cheltenham, in Oxfordshire, in Cambridgeshire, where we've done really well today, what we're hearing back is that voters are really unimpressed with the way that the Conservatives and Reform have been acting together. And of course, a lot of those people in the past would have been Conservative voters, but they're coming to the Lib Dems in their droves at the moment.
You're saying that about the Conservatives and Reform acting together, but have they been? I mean, Reform have made it pretty clear that they don't want to deal with the Conservatives. Why would they? They're taking seats off them, by the absolute shed load. And no one serious in the Conservative Party has called for a deal, have they? I mean, Ben Houchen came closest, but he's talking about coalitions post-election. I haven't really done deals, have they?
It's not for me to talk about Reform and the Conservatives and whether they're cracking deals.
That's what you were just doing. That's why I'm asking the question.
Oh, well, you were asking me about Reform UK and whether I was very concerned about them, and that has the knock-on impact.
Then you answered to say about their sort of no one likes the deals that they're doing, and I'm just saying I don't think they are doing deals, are they?
Well, Robert Jenrick is the person who's talking about it as well, isn't he? And he's the Justice spokesperson for the Tories. But the important thing here is that loads of Conservative voters in the past, people who would have voted Tory in the past, have been put off by some of the rhetoric that they've been hearing from the Conservatives, and they are coming to the Lib Dems in their droves all across the south of England, in what we're calling Middle England, and they are getting Lib Dem community champions instead elected. So throughout the day, we've seen really good results for the Lib Dems all across the country, and I think what people are seeing is that we are the people who can represent them now, and it's clear to me that we're on track for to beat the Conservatives at this election, and on track to replace them in Middle England at the next general election too.
That word again, Middle England. Great to have you on the programme, and thank you for talking about the pretty positive election results today for the Liberal Democrats. Right, let's bring in the gang again, shall we? The former Conservative advisor, Sally Rushton, and the former Director of Communications and Strategy for Labour and biographer of Keir Starmer, Tom Baldwin, and also two faces you probably recognise, Deputy Political Editor Sam Coates and Sky News legend, official title, Adam Bolton as well. Sam, we've been talking a lot about the Conservatives, we've been talking a lot about reform and Labour. What do you make of the Lib Dem performance today?
Well, I think that they do benefit from a change in a political climate that moves away from there being two major parties. And I think that is what we're seeing. There were some wards that switched all the way from Liberal Democrat to Reform UK. So even they are not completely immune to some of the political currents that are going on. I think what's really interesting about the way they're positioning themselves is that the Conservative Party and the Labour Party are responding to the Reform UK threat. It seems, and it's not clear yet, we're going to have to see what they do over the next few days, but there is a good chance that both of them respond to the election results today by moving the agenda a little bit closer to Reform UK. And that is not going to happen with the Liberal Democrats, right? So, if anything, there may be a world in which they become the party that positions themselves as very strongly the anti-Reform UK party, just as they are at the moment presenting themselves as very strongly the anti-Trump party. And I do wonder whether a little bit of space is opening up there. A different Labour leader might decide to do the same thing, but and I don't totally know, and we're going to have to watch what happens next, but I just feel at the moment there are some in Downing Street who want to tug Labour to, they would say, try and work on those voters that might otherwise go to Reform UK by sounding a little bit more sympathetic to the kind of things that they think those voters want, and the Liberal Democrats are going to do the opposite. Let's see if that works.
It's really interesting, isn't it? You can see with the Conservatives as well. We've been talking a lot about the impact that reform are having on the Conservatives, but the Lib Dems really squeezing them in an awful lot of areas as well. Cheltenham there, of course, whether you know very well as someone who used to advise Alex Chalk, who, of course, lost in that seat.
Yeah, the Lib Dems are very able ground campaigners in their own way, and they can pick up on that disenfranchisement, and they are quite good at scooping people up. I'm not going to say bottom feeders, but they can scoop up those, those voters who you can tell I'm a bit bitter about Cheltenham particularly.
I love the way that you said, I'm not saying bottom feeders. You did.
Yes, no, I did. I've distanced myself from that comment.
The Lib Dems also have the advantage they have some issues at the moment that the others aren't going on. They've obviously got the issue of Europe and being more pro-European, which still is sort of treated like kryptonite by the other political parties. They've also got, although it hasn't apparently been a liability for Farage in this election, they've also got their willingness to go out and criticise Donald Trump and the direction in which he's going. And again, I think there's going to be an issue as to whether Labour decide that they want some of that action as well, rather than their present position.
This is the thing, it's almost difficult for Labour because they won such a broad coalition at the last election. It's almost like so difficult to hold that coalition together.
Yeah, everyone always talks about the Red Wall, but lots of the places that Labour won were in traditional Conservative areas. Places like Aylesbury in Buckinghamshire. Now, there, a very small swing from Labour to the Liberal Democrats doesn't give the Liberal Democrats a seat. It gives the Conservatives back the seat. So I thought it was interesting when you were talking to Pat McFadden earlier. He said he didn't really quite know the shape or composition of Labour's opponent in the next election. The truth is, Labour are going to be fighting on 3, possibly 4 fronts. Scotland's going to be the SNP. In some areas, it's going to be the Conservative Party, who are second in 4/5 of Labour's most 100 most marginal seats. In other areas, it's going to be Reform. In some areas, it might be Liberal Democrats, probably not, because there's not much direct contest. But the danger for Labour is if it sheds lots of votes off to the sort of progressive left on issues like Europe or immigration, it doesn't give those progressive left party seats. It gives the Conservatives or Reform seats.
There was I thinking Pat McFadden was just dodging the question about who was the worst opponent out of Kevin Badenoch and Nigel Farage. Much more sympathetic than me.
But this is why, for Labour to say it's all about reform is a mistake. It's got to recognise that it's fighting multiple fronts, It's got to have a message about itself rather than a message just about reform.
But if you're getting effectively the Labour vote sort of splintering all over the place because there isn't a centrifugal force, there isn't a force strong enough at the centre to hold it all together. I mean, that's almost an argument for a new leader.
No, I think the leader that Labour's got, the Prime Minister got, is actually one who's showing on the international stage a stolidity and calm at this most dangerous time for the world, which is getting a lot of respect. I think you can then apply that to the domestic front. I think you're going to see it also in a big European reset. Adam mentioned Europe. You're going to see a big European set in May. So I think there's lots of things coming down the track. What they've got to do is knit this into a story about where the country's going, rather than just single matches being lit.
I'm just going to jump in because we now do have the full result in Buckinghamshire. This is the Conservatives losing to no overall control. And I'll be honest, this is an extraordinary result because it's been under Conservative control since 1973, no longer. The Conservatives are down 29 seats. That puts them on 48, so they're still the largest party, but that is a big drop, and it leaves them 1 seat short of having control of the council. The Lib Dems, the big beneficiaries, though, which is really reflecting our last interview, they've gained 19 seats in Buckinghamshire, putting them on 27. Labour still on 4, Reform picking up 3 seats there. There are quite a few parliamentary seats in this region as well. You know, Chesham and Amersham, for example, the Lib Dems gaining from the Conservatives in a by-election relatively recently. I mean, this is really the Conservative Lib Dem battleground.
We can now say that the Conservatives were defending 18 councils and have lost 18 councils.
When you were saying that earlier, I was like, no, it's not going to happen. They're going to keep Buckinghamshire.
Me. You didn't
I thought they were
me.
going to keep Buckinghamshire. I did. But no, they didn't. They lost it.
Oh, well.
To the point of what we've been talking about, the other thing about that result is that really Reform aren't anywhere, which, you know, brings home that there are other political battles around than fighting Reform. Although, Tom, it's interesting what you're saying, because it doesn't seem to me that sort of saying it's wider than the red wall and Reform is the current direction of you know, the masterminds in Number 10. They seem obsessed with that.
I don't know. I mean, I've been speaking to them, I'm sure you've been speaking, but the conversation I've had is they say we don't want to sort of be seen to be lurching to the left or lurching to the right. What they want to do is get back to this language of national renewal and all these things that are coming forward, like the infrastructure plan, the industrial strategy, the defence review and the European reset. I think we'll talk to something bigger than this kind of politics, divisive politics that Reform does.
Really interesting stuff. Thanks, all of you, very much indeed. It has been an extraordinary set of results so far. Conservatives losing control of all 18 councils that they held before these results. Reform, of course, you know, the big party who are the beneficiaries. They picked up that parliamentary by-election. They've also picked up control of a whole host of councils as well, including North Northamptonshire, Doncaster from Labour. Overall, they're up 596 seats from a standing start. The Lib Dems, the second best performance with 160 seats. We'll have an awful lot of analysis still to come on the Politics Hub after this break. Still to come is more pressure on the shoulders of Kemi Badenoch tonight. We'll be asking that question next.
I'm Deborah Haynes, Sky Security and Defence Editor. The reality of life under Russian fire. People don't want to leave, even though help is here to evacuate them. They say they want to sort out their belongings first. It's absolute chaos. Fire, shouts the commander. There's a dash to safety as Russian drones will be trying to find this position.
We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming.
I've been covering Russia's full-scale war since it began, witnessing the terror and the trauma.
When rockets fall, I try to hide my head under my toys.
Illustrating Ukraine's lost childhood. Hopes and dreams framed by war. Conflict in the Middle East is another major focus.
An incredibly dangerous moment.
We saw the missiles streaking across the sky. We saw the intercept going up, and then we saw the explosions when the intercepts were successful.
With global threats rising, I also explored defence and security in the UK and across NATO. This US aircraft carrier is operating in European waters in a deliberate show of force.
This is routine training for NATO, but should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real.
Tucked away in the National Archives are some of the UK's old defence plans.
The scale of this bunker underlines how seriously governments took the threat of nuclear attack and global conflict. Should allies listen to Vladimir Putin's sabre-rattling?
No, they shouldn't, and they don't.
Sky News, the full story first.
Dates 1945. The day of victory in Europe. Hostilities will end the 8th of May. We may allow ourselves a brief period of rejoicing.
80 years on from that historic moment, we will be at the heart of the events as we reflect, remember and celebrate together. Join us for the full story of VE Day on Sky News.
Hello, welcome back. Well, the Conservatives have spent the last few weeks in full expectation management mode, telling everyone who could hear them that this big electoral test was going to be tough. And I have to say, it's lucky they did, but even they couldn't have predicted just how bad it has been tonight because they have lost control of every single council that they were defending. Kemi Badenoch accepting the country is not yet ready to trust her party. Here's Sky's political correspondent, Rob Powell.
From Lincolnshire to Oxfordshire and in other shires around the country, defeat for the Conservatives. Grimsby turned from the Tories to Labour last year. Now it's reform making strides in the region.
At the moment, they seem to be singing the right songs for the country, and that appeals to people.
I think that reform they'll be able to make a lot of difference because the others can't. They're just selfish, lying.
I like Nigel Farage. I think he's for the UK in general. He's got some good beliefs. He wants to progress. He believes in England a bit more, doesn't he?
From this senior Tory, an acknowledgement of the bleak situation.
It is painful and it is difficult for us, but I think we have to put this into the context of where we are as a party. Where we are as a political party, we had the worst ever general election result last year for my party in our history. And so we are rebuilding. We are absolutely rebuilding.
Other MPs are privately more scathing of Kemi Badenoch, accusing her of not setting out a vision to sell the nation or building a proper campaigning machine. Home to the ruins of the town's castle, Kenilworth is Warwickshire's last remaining Conservative MP too. But the Tories have now lost control of the county council here, under siege on several fronts.
Warwickshire really shows the big problem the Conservatives have. Here and further south, they're losing support to the Lib Dems, while in the north of the county, it's reform that's the threat. Two separate parties hoovering up disillusioned Tories from opposite ends of the political spectrum.
There are plenty of marginal constituencies in this part of the Midlands, so for the Tories, losing here means you're likely losing everywhere.
They just need to regroup, don't they, and get some street cred back. That's all. The reform have got to prove themselves. They're very good at speaking, but we'll have to see what they can do.
I did vote for Boris once, which was Conservative, when he promised to cut down on immigrants, which he didn't. It's the only time I voted Conservative. It was for Boris.
So reform this time?
Yes, reform this time, yeah.
Feels like a lot of people are turning away from the main parties towards some of those smaller ones.
We're disenchanted with what's gone on, firstly with all the whole Conservative thing, and then what the Labour Party have done since they got in.
So as the Lib Dems swallow up swathes of Middle England and Reform continue their advance, what can the Tories do? Conservative MPs want action, but this Tory pollster says it will take time.
I think the first pressure for the Conservatives will be to come up with more clear policies. I was absolutely clear from day one that the Conservatives were going to lose a lot of seats because they were defending so many from 2021. And as I say, turning a supertanker around takes a long time.
Time may be on the Tories' side, but the party seems surrounded. The route out far from clear. Rob Powell, Sky News in Warwickshire.
Well, I don't know about you, but it's felt like a pretty long day, an awful lot to digest. A lot has happened. Not long left on our special programme now. So I guess kind of a quick thought from everyone. What's your feelings now that the dust has settled?
Gosh, a lot of thoughts, feelings and emotions. Obviously,
Yeah.
it's not been a good day for either of the two main parties that have governed this country for the last 100 years. I mean, you know, you've got this insurgent party in Reform, but we do have to have a sense of perspective here. This is the smallest set of local elections in 50 years. You know, a lot got postponed. We shouldn't read too much into it, and I don't think the parties should overly panic at this stage. I don't think it's credible, Nigel Farage going around saying, we're the opposition now. You're not yet. You know, you are still, in many ways, a protest party. You saw that on the doorsteps. People were unhappy. So, you know, it's not a done deal.
Do you agree with that?
I think I do. Look, if there's one thing more dangerous than underestimating the danger of Nigel Farage and Reform, it's overestimating it. These are a small set of results, really worrying for both the Conservative and the Labour Party, no doubt about that. But you've got Labour with a big majority. They've still got the serve in this game. They can still have the capacity to change Britain over the next few years. Reform doesn't, and it's now time for Labour to show it can use that serve advantage to change this country.
I mean, you make good points about the small set of elections and so on, but I guess it is in the interests of Conservative and Labour as well to say, you know, don't overreact, don't panic.
But it's also the media always want to get a very simple narrative and say this is the most exciting thing ever since the sliced bread. And this is what programmes like this do. And we kind of go into sort of hyperventilating.
You're part of programmes like this now, Tom.
No.
This is you now. You're not the director of strategy anymore. You're on the panel, mate.
Small, quiet voice for reason and calm.
Very fair. Adam, what's your take on it?
Well, I partly agree with Tom. I mean, this has come still in the shadow of the general election. You know, they haven't been there for a year yet. There is a lot of time for the government with a substantial majority to try and turn things around. I think for the Conservatives, I would be less optimistic because I think they have a much liver issue as to what they should do about reform, which clearly has got big foothold at the moment. I agree it's a test for reform, but, you know, they are already moving towards, can they do very well in Wales next year, in the Welsh Assembly elections? That will help to keep up their momentum, provided, you know, a lot of the big egos in quite a small party don't fall out with each other.
This is the real test, isn't it?
I'm fascinated by Dame Andrea and Nigel, how that relationship will develop.
And also, like, mayors also have always worked best when they are slightly at odds with the party leader, right? A little bit rebellious, quite independent. I'm not sure how they deal with independence and rebellion and reform. Sam, what's your reflections?
I think that the reason why I think today will have an impact is because I do think that Tory MPs and Labour MPs will panic, because that's what they do. That's what they're programmed to do. We saw in the early 2010s that the Nigel Farage of an earlier era had such an impact that he was a very big reason why we ended up with a Brexit referendum. It is not a predictor of the next election, this set of elections. As Tom says, it's quite a small one. However, the manner of the reaction of both Downing Street and the Conservatives will be fascinating. I'm not sure either of them have got the grit to withstand a little bit of a panic about what's happened today.
But you make an important point. So in the 2010s, the UKIP party topped the poll in European elections, and David Cameron panicked and promised this in-out referendum on Europe. That was bad politics. He danced to their tune, and it ended up to be the most catastrophic decision this country has taken. An incredible act of economic self-harm, because a party leader was worried about splits and worried about a phenomenon led by Nigel Farage. This government mustn't make the same mistake.
All the reason not to panic.
Yeah, there you
and
go.
And you're saying this government mustn't make the same mistake. That sounds like that sounds like there's a little bit of you that worries they might.
I'm saying it'd be a mistake to dance to Nigel Farage's tune. I'm sure Keir Starmer's far too sensible to do that.
There's already a little bit of that going on, I guess, though. If you look at some of the policies he's announced recently, cutting overseas aid to fund defence spending or cutting benefits, that does feel a little bit... I mean, you know, if I shut my eyes and kind of crossed out Keir Starmer, I think that was a right-wing policy.
Well, what you're seeing is a phenomenon which Nigel Farage's great hero, Donald Trump, is acting as a wrecking ball for this country's security, this country's economy. Now, at some point, we have to start talking about Nigel Farage's weak ground rather than just play on his home ground.
It's been a fascinating discussion, and it's been great to have all these four big brains around the table with me.
Sky legend. Sky legend.
Is that your mate? Is that your...
We did
That was amazing. This is why we love Adam so much. It's been genuinely an extraordinary set of results, small set of results, and the general consensus around the table is that nobody should panic. But blimey, reform are on the march. That is it from us tonight. I'll see you Tuesday at 7 p.m. We're going to have an awful lot more fallout, I'm sure, of the election results that we've seen over the last 24 hours. Bad news for Labour and the Conservatives. Reform and the Lib Dems, though, have an awful lot to cheer about.